Welcome to The Explainer. We're all about breaking down important texts and ideas.
So, what really made Jesus overturn those tables in the temple? Was it just a moment of anger? Well, we're about to find out it was so much more than that. Today, we're digging into 6 powerful verses in the Gospel of Matthew that showed this wasn't just an outburst. It was a deeply symbolic statement about what worship is all about. All right, let's get into it. Our story kicks off in verse 12. Jesus walks into the temple, but, he's not there for a quiet prayer session. Nope. He arrives like it's true king, and he's ready to confront something rotten that's taken root right in the heart of the temple. So Jesus walks into the temple of God and just starts casting people out, flipping over tables. It's a dramatic scene, but what's really, really important here is where this is all going down. This isn't happening in the Holy of Holies. It's all taking place in the court of the Gentiles, the one and only area set aside for non-Jews to come and pray. Yeah, just picture it for a second. You travel all this way to a sacred place, a place where you're supposed to connect with God. And what do you find? A noisy, chaotic marketplace. The air is thick with the sounds of animals, the clatter of coins, merchants haggling. The entire purpose of this space was just gone. So you might be wondering, who were these money changers? Well, on the surface, it seems like they were just providing a service, right? You see, you couldn't use regular Roman coins to pay the temple tax because they had the emperor's face on them. Big no-no. But here's the catch. This service became a system of exploitation. These guys were charging crazy high exchange rates, basically preying on people who were just trying to be devout. And it wasn't just the money changers. You had the same corrupt game going on with the animal sales. People would bring their own animal for sacrifice, but the temple inspectors would be like, nope, not good enough. So you were forced to buy an approved animal right there for a ridiculous price, of course. What's especially heartbreaking is that doves were the go-to sacrifice for the poor. So this system turned a simple act of worship into a huge financial burden for the people who could least afford it. Okay, so Jesus causes this huge scene. How does he explain himself? Well, in verse 13, he doesn't even use his own words. Instead, he goes straight to the scriptures, quoting the ancient prophets to lay down his judgment. And listen to this. He says, "It is written, 'My house shall be called the house of prayer,' but you have made it a den of thieves." This one sentence is just so powerful. It's not just one quote. He's brilliantly weaving together 2 different prophecies from the Old Testament to make his point. It's a masterclass in delivering a rebuke. And right there, in that one sentence, he perfectly captures the conflict. It's a tale of 2 temples, what God intended it to be versus what did it actually become. So the first part comes from the prophet Isaiah. "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all people." See that? For all people. By turning the one space for non-Jews into a chaotic market, the leadership was essentially putting up a giant "keep out" sign. They were slamming a door that God himself had opened. And then he hits them with the second part, from the prophet Jeremiah. When he calls it a den of robbers, he's not just talking about the money. A den of robbers is a hideout, a place where thieves go to feel safe after they've committed their crimes. He's accusing them of using God's house as a cover for their corrupt activities, pretending to be religious while they cheat people. But what Jesus does next is just as important as what he just did. This wasn't only about tearing things down, because right after all this chaos, in verse 14, the story takes a turn and shows us what the temple is really for. So verse 14 says, "And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them." Think about that. Into the very space he just cleared out, he brings healing. The noise of money and greed is gone, and it's replaced by these incredible acts of mercy and restoration. It's just a beautiful picture of what's supposed to happen there. And that's really the key, isn't it? The contrast is so stark. Jesus doesn't just tear down the corrupt system and walk away. He immediately shows everyone what's supposed to take its place. The temple isn't about profit. It's about bringing people, especially the broken and the outcast, to God for healing. Well, you can bet that this whole scene, the tables flipping, the miracles, did not go unnoticed, especially by the temple bigwigs. Their reaction is what we get in verse 15. So it says the chief priests and scribes saw all this, and they were sore displeased. They were indignant. And what's so fascinating is what ticked them off. It wasn't just the mess he made. It was the wonderful things he did, the healings, and it was the sound of children praising him, calling him Hosanna to the Son of David. So they go up to Jesus and basically say, "Do you hear what these kids are saying? They're trying to trap him. They're challenging his authority by pointing to the praise he's getting, because they just can't stomach hearing him called the Son of David, a title for the Messiah." And Jesus' response in verse 16 is just perfect. He doesn't get into a big argument. He doesn't give his own opinion. He just calmly says, "Yea, have you never read?" And then he quotes Psalm 8 right back at them, completely flipping their challenge on its head. "Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast perfected praise." Boom. With that one line from their own scriptures, he shows them that the sincere, heartfelt praise from these kids is more real, more authentic than their whole religious system. True praise, he's saying, comes from an innocent heart, not from a position of power. And with that, the confrontation is over. There's no big debate, no shouting match. The story ends with this quiet, deliberate action in verse 17. He just leaves them. He walks out of the city to Bethany for the night. Can you picture it? He just leaves the religious leaders standing there, speechless, in the temple that he just reclaimed. His actions and his words have said everything that needed to be said. There's nothing left to argue about. So when you put it all together, what do we learn from these 6 short verses? Well, for one, this was way more than just a flash of anger. It was a prophetic act. It was a judgment against religion that cared more about money than people. It was a restoration of the temple's true purpose. And maybe most of all, it was a bold declaration of his own divine authority. And that leaves us with this final, massive question to think about. By cleaning out a physical building, what was Jesus really telling us about the future of worship itself? You know, this whole event points to something even bigger. It's a preview of a much greater cleansing, one where our access to God isn't about a building at all, but about spirit and about truth.